Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, Arianna Campbell, Shareholder and Chief Operating Officer at Boomer Consulting, and with me today is Amanda Wilkie. Hi, Amanda. Thank you for joining this episode of the podcast.
Always excited to chat with you, Arianna.
Yes, so Amanda is a consultant here at Boomer Consulting, and today we're going to be talking about change management and the transformation triangle. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. But before we jump into talking about change management and learning about the transformation triangle, Amanda, it'd be great if you can just share a little bit about your role and how you help firms so that we can provide some context around our podcast topic.
Yeah, absolutely, Arianna. So I'm a consultant here, as you said, with Boomer Consulting. So I help firms in a few different ways. My focus areas are technology and process. So out of our five pillars, those are the two that I really focus on in. So as a consultant, I help firms do a couple of different things. One, I help them with technology strategy and building a strategic technology plan, but also in there, I help with process improvement. We focus on project management, and lately we've been really focused more on change management as well. And I know that's what we're going to talk about today, and really how all of those work together to help firms just move further and move faster on their their transformation journey. And again, I look forward to this conversation so that we can start talking about how all of those things really work together.
That's great. And obviously you get a lot of different perspectives with going in and working with firms and seeing where they're seeing successes, because that's the most important place to start with, is how can they continue building on those successes, but also some of the challenges that firms are running into. So I'd love to hear your perspective as you're working with firms, whether it be through consulting, in our communities, through training. What are you seeing related to change management in firms?
Great question. And I think to answer that question, Arianna, let's back up a little bit and talk about kind of the history and the evolution that we've seen in the accounting profession. You know, it's probably been 15, 20 years since the profession really started to focus on process management, in particularly process improvement, and how do we get more efficient at the things that we do so that we're able to do more and we're able to service clients better and we're able to build more capacity for our staff. And that, that worked well. We've had a huge focus on that again, almost 2 decades. And probably, I'd say 5 to 10 years ago, the buzz in the profession was all about, now we need project management. We need people and we need a process for executing projects, whether that project is delivering something new, like implementing new technology, or maybe it is delivering an engagement or any type of project. So we really saw the profession start to focus on that area and those needs. And they saw that a focus on project management, again, made their projects much more successful. It allowed them to service their clients and bring a better quality product to their client, but it also helped them achieve more internally. Like I said, maybe that example of rolling out a new software application. Project management really helped in that area. And now I'm super excited to see there's a focus on change management. And change management differs from things like project management. Project management is going to get that new application implemented for you. It's going to focus on the rollout of things. That project can be complete. It does not mean that there has been adoption. Mm-hmm. And that's where change management comes in, because as you and I often say, Arianna, organizations don't change. It's the individual that changes. So where something like project management has been focused on, let's change the organization, Change management focuses on let's get the individual to change, which is going to support the organization through the change and through the project. So I'm happy to see that one, the profession has started to focus on the individual and how do we support the individual through change. And we're starting to see, leaders and leaderships within the firms really understand that they need a focus in this area. So when you ask, what are we seeing in firms around change management, I think that is one of the biggest things is the support from leadership around things like change management, and even just starting to educate and understand what change management means to the individual, and therefore how it can support the individual as well as the organization and the profession overall.
Yeah, so that's some really helpful background, really looking at the progression through process improvement, shifting to process management, to project management, to now a focus on change management. So sometimes we can be tempted to feel like things are stagnant at times as far as things that are centered around internal operations, but really the profession continues to evolve. And I'm also excited as well to see the focus on change management and understanding that while focusing on organizational change is important, individual change is what really makes a difference, and that will help to reduce some of the friction that can slow down evolution and transformation within firms.
Yeah.
So
Isn't it so great, Ariana, that we are now focusing on that individual? And when we talk to firms and or talk to anyone in the profession and start to break down these differences and the different frameworks for supporting each of these, it's almost like a huge aha when people realize, oh, we should actually focus on the individual. And I think it's such a great, it's a great thing and it's a great time in the profession.
yes, I agree. And I think one of the biggest opportunities that it creates when you're focusing on the individual is to get beneath the surface and understand what's going to help them move forward with whatever changes are happening. And I would say that that does require, maybe asking different questions, having different conversations. But when you can do that, it has benefits not only with change management, but I think there is a ripple effect from a relationship perspective, because when you focus on the individual, that also helps to build relationships. But going back to a point that you made earlier, is firms really getting an aha when you start talking about process management, project management, and change management. I think common language sometimes gets in the way. So I was really excited when you started talking to me about the concept of the transformation triangle. So I'd love for you to share, what is the transformation triangle and how does it relate to change management?
Yeah. So, Ariana, for our listeners, they probably don't know. You know because you participate in this. Our consultants get together every January and we start talking about what trends we're seeing in the profession. And we usually talk about what we're seeing in our five pillars. So, leadership, growth, technology, talent, and process. And this year we started seeing some common themes, and the topics that we're talking about, process management, project management, and change management, we really started seeing them in all five pillars. So we kind of put them together because they do all work together and support one another. And so that's what we're calling the transformation triangle, because you really need a good understanding of process management, which again includes process improvement. And I think that's important to call out because we are changing a little bit of the language there. But process management includes process improvement. So it's process improvement, project management, and change management. Now, while they are a bit different, usually a focus on these areas require kind of the same skill set, if you will. It requires good organization, requires good communication skills, and it requires the people in these areas to really be able to influence people at all levels of the organization. But again, they work so well together that you really need to have a focus on all of them. As we've already discussed, a project management can deliver a new project for you. It doesn't mean that there's going to be adoption. It also doesn't mean that you have a good, consistent process in place to support the new project, the new initiative, the new application that has been implemented. And, we've seen that, a project can be completed, but then you've got 18 different ways to do it. Or a project has been completed, but you only have 10 to 15% adoption. And that means you had a focus on project management, but you didn't have a focus on process management or on change management. So again, to really transform your organization, you have to have a focus on all of these things.
That is such a good point. And I think one thing that's important to keep in mind is that there are frameworks for each of these. So we don't want to just kind of try and navigate it or figure it out on our own when it comes to process improvement, process management, project management, and change management. So can you talk a little bit about the frameworks as well?
Yeah, and I think that this is something that firms should really focus on is leveraging these frameworks. You and I help firms with process improvement projects using the Lean Six Sigma framework. That's what we use for process improvement and really process management as well. So Lean Six Sigma is what we use in process. We also leverage the PMI or Project Management Institute framework for project management. That is what helps us plan how we're going to execute those projects. A lot of firms use that as well. And then on the change management side, there's the ProSci change management framework. So again, they're a little different. Well, I should say they're actually a lot different. Fundamentally, it's about communication, organization, and influence around the process, around executing the project, and around the individual and adoption of the change.
Yeah, and as we're looking at the new roles that are coming into firms, more of the non-traditional roles that really help to support transformation, we're seeing more and more firms have individuals explore and then ultimately get certifications in each of these areas. So the PMP for project management, Lean Six Sigma green belts for certifications there, as well as the ProSci Change Practitioner certification, of which you actually have all three. So really being able to pull those different pieces together and make sure that we are equipping people internally with the training that they need to actually administer these frameworks, which I'd mention is actually, we had some really interesting conversations recently at our process circle, which is a community of leaders within firms who are focused on these three areas of project management, process management, and change management, and really understanding from their perspective how much more critical it is for these three to be integrated because they often operate in silos, right? Tell me about your perspective on how you've seen the siloed approach and maybe how firms have helped to break down those silos.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought up the process circle because as you know, the last couple of years, we have really broadened the focus there. So adding project management and change management to the focus of process management. And as you mentioned, it's very important for all three. And it's great because we're starting to see such a diverse group in that area. And they're leaning on each other. There are people who are PMPs in there. There are people who are focused on change. There are people who are, Lean Six Sigma, green belts. And it's so great to bring them together because they do need to focus and focus on all three. Firms need to focus on all three. So what do we see when these things are done in silos? Kind of like mentioned a little earlier, you can have a project done. And I'll give you an example. Because I worked with a firm and they had implemented a new application. It was an application that finance had identified, finance brought in, came to IT, said, hey, we would love this new application. And IT said, great, we're going to implement that for you. And they did. And 6 months later, I'm sitting there talking to the firm leaders and including the IT leader. And IT was like, yeah, we executed that project. It was done. It was a success. And people around the table said, but wait a second, I'm still doing things the old way because I'm not 100% comfortable. I don't trust the software quite yet. Or I'm doing things the old way because I never got fully trained. And so I'm not comfortable with the application yet. And the managing partner was like, wait a second, I thought all of this was done 6 months ago and we were fully on board and we were, using this application. They had just focused on that project management and they did exactly what project management does. They implemented the tool. They did not focus on how this is going to change their process, and they did not focus on the needs of the individual and help them get comfortable and help provide them training and help provide reinforcement of this change. So this wonderful new technology that had been requested by finance was only being used, to a fraction of its capabilities. And so the firm really didn't experience the transformation that new tool could have internally because they didn't focus on all three areas of the transformation triangle.
And that's a great story, a great example because it's relatable. And it helps to really highlight how all three of those pieces work together. Yes, a very key part is making sure that we're managing the project and getting whatever the item is implemented. But again, if you don't have support from the other parts, it can really limit the effectiveness of that implementation because there's not the support in the other areas. Well, one last question that I have for you is what can firms do to make sure that they're leveraging the transformation triangle and that they're really navigating their way through the change management portion?
Excellent question. You mentioned all of the frameworks. I think it's important to have people internally who understand all of these unique frameworks. Not only do you need the people who understand the frameworks, but you need the people to be able to apply those frameworks and that will work together. So if you have a project that you are kicking off, you need to make sure that you have a project manager who is focused on how are we going to implement this. You need to make sure that you have a process manager who's focused on how is this going to change the way that we actually do our work, do our jobs, deliver services to clients. And you need to have someone who is focused on what the individual needs. What's going to be some of the pushback? How do we help them get more comfortable with the change? How do we make sure the individual is changing along with the organization? So I think the number one thing that firms need to do to leverage the transformation triangle is make sure that they understand it's critical to the success and the transformation of the organization and make sure that they are investing in the frameworks and investing in people and upskilling them into these frameworks so that they can support the firm going forward.
That is fantastic advice. It's great to hear your insights. Thanks so much for your time today. It was a really great conversation around change management and the transformation triangle. And for our listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation, we release new episodes every Tuesday morning. We talked about process today, but we also cover topics related to talent, leadership, technology, and growth. But what all the topics have in common is that they are crucial to your firm's success. And we also help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. So if you like what you heard today, please subscribe, and thanks for listening.